Right now, I want to bring you a documentary. Some time ago, I was praying. This is several months back. And the Lord, just like in several other things, said something to me that really got my attention. He told me about salt. I said, salt? What's that?
At this point, I think it might be helpful to take a moment and clearly define what salt actually is in order to better enrich your understanding of how important it is to your health.
Now, common salt is composed primarily of sodium chloride, 40% sodium and 60% chloride. Salt is processed from salt mines or the evaporation of seawater or other mineral-rich waters. It is mainly used to add flavor to food or as a food preservative. It preserves food by absorbing water, making the environment too dry to support mold or bacteria.
Salt itself is so essential to the human body that saltiness is one of the 5 classifications of perceptible taste by taste receptors on the tongue. And it's so essential to life in general that it's actually the main mineral constituent of ocean water and a huge part of the Earth's crust, especially underwater where hydrothermal vents in the oceanic crust.
Our bodies need and acquire adequate amounts of salt daily. Salt's the second major constituent next to water in our body. The immune system can't function well without salt. The hormonal system can't function well without salt. And iodine can't work in the body without adequate amounts of salt. So I consider salt one of the basics. I check salt levels on every patient that comes in the door. I can tell you the vast majority are salt deficient.
Well, salt is an essential nutrient. Sodium and chloride. You cannot have nerve impulses without sodium chloride. They're an integral part of the biochemical system of nerve transmission. You cannot move water around in your body or retain it in the right compartments, inside your blood vessels, inside your tissues, inside the cells. You can't keep things in the right compartment without sodium chloride. The chief cells in your stomach cannot make stomach acid without salt.
1904, where it all began. This was the first study to report a positive correlation between salt intake and blood pressure in humans. But they were rebutted only 3 years later.
Salt restriction, however, is extremely damaging to the prenatal development of the fetus in the womb, and it became well known by more discerning scientists and physicians that these recommendations, especially to pregnant women, would lead to a widespread damage to millions of newborn children. By reducing salt intake during pregnancy, the developing fetus is not receiving adequate oxygen due to the lowered blood volume, since sodium is essential for maintaining blood volume. The low sodium in the body also prevents enough blood from circulating through the kidneys, which causes the kidneys to release more renin, a signaling enzyme, which is a compensation mechanism the body uses to increase blood hormonal imbalances in the mother, which commonly symptomize in the forms of hair loss, depression, and skin issues.
The FDA went on to set the recommended salt intake level at 2,300 milligrams daily, while the American Heart Association worsened it by setting the daily salt intake limits at 1,500 milligrams. When the body in effect requires much more salt to keep it in optimum condition daily. What a deception.
They've been lying to you for so long. They've been lying to you for so long. All these things were forged, created with assumptions, speculations. And nobody held them to account. We allowed these things in schools and called it science, but it was never science. What you had was pseudoscience playing out, and they were not halted.
We were purposely taught to do things wrong, I think, at some point, and it seems to have gotten worse in the late 70s. They're so far out of the real reality of what's going on physiologically. And they're being taught such crapola in medical school and residency that when you tell them these things, they don't have a fabric of reality to even piece this stuff into.
So in med school, I was taught salt causes hypertension, avoid salt. Healthier people eat less salt. So the government has been trying to tell us to drop salt in our diet since before I was in med school, probably since like 1960s or so. And So I went back through the literature. So as I'm looking through back on this book, I'm thinking, you know, they taught me salt causes hypertension. I'm putting all these patients on salt. I ain't seeing all this hypertension. In fact, with hypertensive patients, I'm seeing their levels lower when they get the right kind of salt, unrefined salt in. And, you know, what's going on here?
While medical practitioners like this have come to full terms with the beneficial effects of salt on the health of their patients, several others, who still operate with the warped programming they received at medical school, still insist on low-salt diets, as in this hilarious example.
Well, sir, it looks like your sodium is pretty low. That's weird. I've been eating plenty of salt. Do you think I should try eating more? No, sir. I know it seems like that would help, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Oh, really? There's a lot of physiology and biology involved. I don't want to bore you, but we'll be checking some lab studies and restricting your fluid intake. Okay, sure, if you think that'll help. Okay, sir, it looks like your sodium dropped again, so we're going to be giving you IV fluids. That should fix this. Sure, fine with me. Okay, it's still getting worse, so now we're going to give you IV water pills to make you pee more. And still giving me IV fluids? Yes. The kidney doctors, we're going to be giving you some special pills to bring up your sodium. Oh, okay, great. Are they salt pills? Your nurse will bring them in soon. What kind of pills are they? Sodium chloride tablets. Sodium chloride? Isn't that salt? Yes. So these are like salt pills. Technically. Wait, at first you said this was more complicated than I thought, but sorry, sir, I'm really busy. I gotta go check on some other patients.
Throughout Africa, we have salt. We have abundance of salt. So what do? And salt is good for your health. So what are they doing? They make you run away from salt. Then they sell salt to you in several ways. Almost all the things they use in treating you has salt. Almost all. Whether it's your eyes, intravenous, salt.
So I'm picturing these guys from Big Pharma in the back room, and they're saying, wouldn't it be great if we can get everybody to get our blood pressure pills? We get everybody to be hypertensive, and we will do it in such a way the doctors don't figure it out. So number one was the low salt diet in the face, and that one I knew about from 1980. In the face of no evidence, they did that. They instituted that.
Here in Chicago, and thousands of people fell out with heat stroke. The first thing they give them intravenously on the way to the hospital to get heat stroke is saline solution, which is salt water, yeah. And it's absolutely criminal that these 750 people who died were all ones who were on a salt-restricted diet. They're all seniors who were on a salt-restricted diet. They died of heat stroke because these doctors didn't have the courtesy to call these people up in good manners, just to call up and say, look, whether you believe in the salt-restricted diet or not, right now you need to put a couple of tablespoons of salt in a gallon of water, be sipping on that until the heat wave goes away. But they didn't do that. And so all those people who died of heat stroke who were under the care of doctors who were on a restricted salt diet, those doctors should be put in jail, okay, for almost like the same thing as vehicular homicide, the same type of thing as manslaughter, right, type of thing.
After starving your body of salt, now you get sick and they start injecting you with salt.
Do you know my mother-in-law got a flu shot a few months ago, unbeknownst to us, and she collapsed in her room at the assisted living place. 5 minutes later, cracks open her head. She's taken to the hospital because she has high blood pressure at 280 over 170.
Unbelievable.
When she gets to the hospital, the doctor has not come in. It's been an hour. Do you know what they told the nurses to do in front of yours truly while I was in the room? They said, give her 2 IV bags of fluids and do a push. Now, a push means there's a little clip on the little tube that takes the salt water into your body. That means take it off and get it in her in a hurry. They gave her 18,000 milligrams of salt at a stroke level high blood pressure, and guess what happened when she got all that salt? Without the doctor coming in, her blood pressure started coming down.
Unbelievable.
I have asked the doctor, I've asked nurses, not that I don't know the answer. I said, why are you using saline with this patient? We just brought them in from the emergency room. And they'll say, well, if we don't use saline, the patient will die. Right. If you don't use salt, the patient will die.
So if you would please consider increasing your salt intake and potassium intake. Your kidneys are what release water out of the body. The kidneys operate with what are called sodium potassium pumps. What's another word for sodium, Seth? Salt. All right, so you have salt potassium pumps that are required in your kidneys to pump out water. And Seth, what happens is when we start depriving ourselves of salt, because the world tells us to eat less salt, and our doctors all tell us to eat less salt, need a low sodium diet, our kidneys don't get the salt they need, and we will start retaining water. And as we retain water, there's now increased pressure on our blood vessels. And guess what the majority of Americans are put on? Diuretics like Lasix to make you pee. Do you know what Lasix is? It's patented salt. Hydrochlorothiazide. It's patented salt. HCTZ. This is your diuretics. So they want you to swallow their prescription salt in a tablet form. They don't want you eating it in your food. It's one of the greatest lies in medicine.
If you had enough salt all the while, you would have not had the sickness. That disease would have not been there. Insufficient salt is what more people are sick of, but they don't know.
Now, the truth is, every single patient on earth who is considered sick for any reason or dehydrated and goes for any reason to a hospital, every patient only has one thing in common. Just close your eyes and think about it. Every disease, every condition, they all have only one thing in common being pumped into their body the whole time they're in there. Salt, 24/7, 9,000 milligrams per bag, and they're charging you. They only are charged $2 a bag to buy those bags of salt. You know what the average adult charge for one bag is in a hospital in America? $893 they bill your insurance for a $2 bag of salt water. Children are charged $400 by their insurance. It's the largest racket in medicine.
The Bible says the world will be deceived by pharmakeia. That's the pharmaceutical industry. The world will be deceived by them. So always remember. So if they tell you, don't do this, start checking whether it's actually what you should be doing. Just check to be sure. Because they've been lying for years. That's how they got rich.
It's a staple. Human beings have needed salt since the beginning of time. We were designed by our maker to need salt. You know, you can look at the curves. It's very easy to look at them. You see high mortality rate on the low end of salt intake, and then it goes down. And it doesn't really matter how much salt you use. Maybe at very high rates, there's problems, but people aren't going to eat that amount of salt. They just need the right kind of salt, which is unrefined salt, such as Celtic brand sea salt, Redmond's real salt, the Himalayan salt. I've tested all 3 versions of those 4 times. I didn't find toxic agents, and I found adequate amounts of minerals in all of those kinds. I think those are very healthy forms of salt.
The body does not run on sugar. The body runs on salt. That's why all of the fluids of our body are salted. Our tears, our saliva, our urine, our blood, our sweat are all salty solutions. And we need salt. In fact, we should be eating approximately 12 to 14 grams of salt, and that's if you are approximately 70 kilos or 154 pounds.
We listen to the so-called professionals, and many have died listening to them. Think how many people have suffered strokes and all kinds of ailments because they listen to their doctor. Think how many people have been afraid of salt. They say, oh, in fact, they've eliminated salt from their food. They don't want this because so much salt. Well, I thought so myself. I thought so too. I thought so. But this is why I talk to you about praying in tongues. Because from praying in tongues, the Spirit of God talks to me and He guides me. I speak in tongues and solutions come. So if you will pray in tongues, you'll be amazed what knowledge will be brought to you. The Bible tells us when we speak in tongues, we're speaking mysteries. Mysteries. And so when I speak in tongues, and then I interpret the mysteries to my understanding, because in tongues, you don't know what you said. But with the gift of interpretation of tongues, you bring whatever information is given to you in the Spirit into the natural realm so you can understand it. All right. So this is really remarkable, really remarkable. And you have to let others know. You have to let others know. You need salt. More salt than less salt. And you just heard, they've actually been giving all the sick people that they're treating in the hospitals, they're giving them salt. But they don't know. They repackage it and sell it to you in different forms. But you had it at home all the while. Let me read 2 Kings chapter 2 from verse 19. When Elisha was in Jericho, and the men of the city came to him. Look what the Bible says. And the men of the city said unto Elisha, Behold, I pray thee, the situation of this city is pleasant, as my Lord seeth. But the water is not. In other words, the water is bad, and the ground barren. So the water is bad. And he said, Elisha said, Bring me a new cruse, and put salt therein. And they brought it to him. And he went forth unto the spring of the waters, and cast the salt in there, and said, Thus saith the Lord, I have healed these waters, and there shall not be from thence any more death or barren land. He used salt to heal the water. That's what God told him. He says, it's salt they need. Go put salt in the water. And he went and put salt and prophesied no more death. And they were free. Let me show you an even more important one. You'll be surprised. How many know Jesus never lied to anybody? Jesus never lied. Jesus never exaggerated. Jesus spoke absolute truth. Watch. St. Mark's Gospel, chapter 9 and verse number 50. The words of Jesus, salt is good. Look at it. That's Jesus. You can't beat that. You can't beat that. They told you salt is bad, but Jesus said salt is good. All right, let's read the rest of it. But if the salt have lost its saltness, wherewith will ye season it? Read the next part. Have salt in yourselves, and have peace one with another. Tell me. If Jesus didn't mean this, what else did he mean? You tell me. If this wasn't what he meant, what did he mean? He just told you salt is good. And then he says, have salt in yourselves. What other interpretation do you want to give it? We just learned from the medical personnel that we listened to, they said a lot of people are sick because they don't have sufficient salt in themselves. That's why they're sick. And then the other guy said, for all the sick people in the hospitals all over the world, there's one thing that is common with all of them when they are admitted. There's one thing that's common with all of them. Intravenous salt. Salt is what they put into their bodies. Why did they do this? I told you, if you're well, the medical doctors will be broke. The pharmaceutical industry will be broke. So they can't afford for you to be very well. They need you to be sick. So they can't always tell you the truth. And many medical doctors find out about this late, some never discover. They think they're in a profession to help people get cured. After all, that's why they went to medical school. until they meet the regulators. And those who are from the Ministry of Health, they're not in the Ministry of Health. Let's say it a little better. Department of Health. Okay? In some countries like Nigeria, there's a Ministry of Health. Supposed to be, right? They call them ministries. So they're departments, but they are not in the Department of Health. Because they don't make anybody healthy. It's a pity. But see how evil, how much evil they've done to so many. So they know salt is cheap. But they repackage it to you, sell it to you in different forms, and tell you not to take enough salt in your food. And so you don't take it, then you get sick, then they sell it to you. You just heard from all those people. But the best to hear from is Jesus, and I just read his words to you. He'll never tell you salt is good if it's not good for you. But he just told you. So you want to be healthy? What's your diet now? Get more salt. Praise God. Yeah, you're going to be so healthy. Yeah. Because God sent me to bring his message to you and to help you in your journey of life.